City of Mist is a TTRPG designed to allow players to exist in a urban playground mixed with fantastical elements. The city is overshadowed by this mythical essence called the mist that prevents normal everyday people from understanding the fantastical things going on around them. But player characters are what are known as rifts, beings that are attached to mythological beings or fantastical creatures that imbue them with their powers that they can tap into to varying degrees of intensity, but their magical powers are unknown to the everyday people of the city. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I am Eric, and we're going to be doing a TTRPG review today. So full disclosure, I picked up the City of Mist starter box, and I have run this for a couple of different groups, a few different times, going into various depths of the adventure. Nobody has fully completed it yet, but we have had a great time playing it, and a lot of my review and my insights are based off both my feedback and the player's feedback on the system. So to give you a sense of what we're looking at, a rift is composed of both a logos and a mythos. The logos is their role in their day-to-day life, the thing that keeps them grounded, whereas the mythos is the otherworldly entity that resides inside of them that gives them their fantastical powers. And player characters can have a greater sense of logos or mythos, but we'll get into that a little bit later once we touch on the mechanics. In my opinion, what really ignites the mind with City of Mist is how the world is constructed. If you are a fan of the graphic novel series Fables, or if you really like the TV show Once Upon a Time, then this world will really resonate with you, I think. The city in City of Mist has a wide variety of districts and people groups that you can interact with, and it really allows you to have whatever flavor you want for a campaign or a one-shot that you're running in it. There is a spot somewhere in the city that fits the tone that you're going for. A quick aside as to what I love about this system, and also shout out to Cineboat Games for writing the system in such a way that is so evocative and fun. So there are people in this world that are called rifts, and all player characters are rifts, but not all rifts are player characters. Players can encounter rifts as part of their adventures. And there is one in one of the source books based off of Pinocchio. This person has the essence of Pinocchio imbued in them. And if, I were trying to come up with that off the top of my head, gravitate towards a young boy who wants to grow older, and maybe there's something that's preventing him from attaining that, something to do with lying, yada, yada, yada. But what they did is so fun and unique and brilliant. You have a woman who is a journalist for a tabloid rag TMZ style outfit. She used to be an award-winning journalist, but she lost that job, and she still desires to become a real journalist again. However, she has discovered that she is very good at her tabloid job, and it's very lucrative, so there is a temptation to continue to do sensational headlines and maybe even start lying in her stories because of how lucrative it is. That's just such a cool way to portray the character of Pinocchio in an urban fantasy environment. When I read that, I was like, chef's kiss. So let's get into the mechanics. So City of Mist is based off of the Powered by the Apocalypse engine, which I know a lot of people will instantly click off the video once they hear that, but stick around because they do some really cool things with the Powered by Apocalypse engine that I really like. I've played a few PBTA games that, the mechanics can be really simple, which is really accessible for a lot of people. But I tend to get bored pretty quickly with a lot of Powered by the Apocalypse games. This one did not bore me because of the scaffolding that they built on the engine itself. For those of you that don't know, the Powered by the Apocalypse system is a 2d6 system. Those are generally the only two dice you're going to need for a Powered by the Apocalypse system, and City of Mist is no different. They do sell some cool 12-sided die that are thematic to the game. Let's see if I can get my camera to focus on them. There we go. But they're D12 that just go 1 through 6 twice, so you can just play with any D6s that you have at home. Where City of Mist really makes the game engine their own is with the aforementioned Logos and Mythos system. So the way that this system works is player characters are made up of 4 different templates, and a template can be either a Logos or a Mythos template. You have to have at least one of each, but the rest of the configuration is up to you. For example, Job here from the starter box. You see he has 1 purple theme, and 3 brown orangey themes. This indicates that these are his logos. He's very grounded in his day-to-day life, but he is touched by the biblical figure of Job. So he can tap into this when he needs to, but most of his abilities and powers come from his day-to-day life. Then you have Lily Chow here, who is split 2 and 2. So 2 mythos, 2 logos. This indicates a character that, has a strong connection to their mythos, but still has a strong sense of who they are as a person. And lastly, you have characters like Baku, who are 3 mythos and 1 logos. This means that Baku is very tapped into his mythological being and that side of his life, and he's hanging on by a thread to day-to-day life and to connecting with other people who are not riffs. I love it when mechanics inform roleplay and they sing together in really cool ways, and I feel like this system does that well by showing you tangibly with your character sheet how detached you are from humanity. That's something that I think a lot of TTRPGs don't reckon with a lot of times, is like, as player characters grow more and more powerful, what does that do to your relationships with people who can't fathom the things that you get up to when you're adventuring? And for someone like Baku, it's going to be very hard for him to connect with people because he is so tapped into his mythos. Whereas Job is almost terrified of his mythos and the power he can wield. And he clings to the people around him in order to feel safe and connected with the world and keeping his mythos at bay. And I love it. But there's more to characters than just the larger concepts of their logos and mythos. Each of these elements has 3 power tags and a weakness tag. There's some nuance when you get into the actual character creation flow, which we're not going to get into the weeds that far in this video. If you would like a more in-depth video on City of Mist, actually like creating characters and playing the system, I would love to do that. Just let me know in the comments below. But when you're making your standard Power by the Apocalypse 2d6 dice roll, when you are taking a specific move within the system, you look at the tags on your character sheet and you apply as many are relevant to that roll. When I was running the game, occasionally I would have players trying to do a thing and there's like only one makes sense right now. So I guess I'm just getting a +1 to this roll. And I've had other times where somebody got up to 5 relevant tags and they had a really compelling argument as to why. And I was like, you know what? I can't fault your logic. So yes, +5 to this roll. But on the flip side of that, there are the weakness tags that you can invoke. Either the MC, which is the name of the game master for this system, or other players can point out and say, hey, it seems like this weakness tag on your character would be applicable here. You can also invoke it yourself. And when you have a weakness tag that applies a -1 to your power, but you want to do this because they're not a net negative for your character, the primary way that your character improves through the system is when you make a roll that has a weakness tag invoked. When you roll with the weakness tag, whatever theme that weakness tag is on, there's a little track called attention that you mark. And when you mark it 3 times, you get to improve the theme in some way. And yeah, that's how you improve your character. And I love the idea that the way that you gain experience in the system is by confronting your weaknesses. I also love thematically how health works in this system. So you have statuses as opposed to something like health points that are this numerical extrapolation of the bodily harm that your character has taken. With statuses, your character has something like bruised 1 or charmed 3, tied up 2. And these indicate the current state that your character is in. And that provides a really narrative way to show how your character is impeded, as well as allowing for multiple tracks of different statuses. I can have a status of broken arm 3 and distracted 1. And depending on the move that I'm taking, if it's something cerebral, then maybe my broken arm wouldn't impede my ability to do that, but the fact that I'm distracted would, as well as allowing for things to upgrade along the same track. If I have bruised 1 and then I take head ringer 2, that would just replace the bruised 1 status since they are both physical ailments. Once a status reaches level 5, it is incapacitating. Your character can no longer function in things that would require that status to be applicable. So if it's something mental, then maybe I can still take physical actions, but I'm too distracted or scared out of my mind to speak or reason. Or if it's something physical, then maybe I can still talk, I can still try to give my allies a warning, but I can't get up, I can't move around the space. And then once you have a status level 6, you are dead or permanently transformed in some impactful way. And your character is basically removed from gameplay until that can get resolved, if it can ever get resolved. But it's not just a tracker of the health or mental health of your character. They also impede your rolls. If you are doing a roll that Broken Arm 3 would be applicable, then you take a -3 to that roll. Or Distracted 1, you would take a -1 to that roll. And so the harder your character gets hit, it impedes their ability to continue to fight on, which I really like. I like that idea that your character going into dangerous situations and getting smacked around would have a consequence to their ability to continue to function. But additionally, if the status can also be perceived as positive, like maybe your character has gunshot wound 4, and so anytime they were trying to do something physical in the fight, they had a -4 and it was really debilitating. But when you all roll up to the friend of your crew who is a nurse at 3 o'clock in the morning and try to convince her to patch you up, well, gunshot wound 4 now is a plus to that convince roll because I'm shot, I'm bleeding, please will you help me? That would be very convincing to this person. Statuses can also represent things that are altering your character temporarily, as opposed to just being a status of their mental or physical well-being. So for example, if a player character disarms a mobster they're in a fight with and takes their gun from them, well, now your character has the status gun 1. You have a gun that you can shoot people with that gives you a +1 when you take an action where it would be relevant. Or if an ally decides to use the change the game move to wrap your character in radiant light to protect them from damage and they succeed on that roll, you might get a status of shielded 2. That anytime you are facing danger, taking that specific move, you get a +2 because it's harder for things to hit you. Keep in mind, though, that the level 5 and 6 statuses still are applicable. So if it was a radiant shielding around you and it got up to shielded 5, maybe it becomes a hardened radiant crystalline cocoon that has completely trapped your character accidentally. Positive statuses, when they reach level 5 or 6, do become debilitating. So keep that in mind with statuses, that you don't want to go too crazy with it. And then additionally, when your characters are trying to harm dangers, is what they call adversaries, monsters, what have you in the system. When your character is trying to harm a danger or convince a danger, talk to them in a structured encounter setting, then your character puts statuses on them, and dangers are built in a way to where they have different thresholds based on the intent of the statuses. So they might have a hurt threshold of 3 and a convince threshold of 4. And that just indicates the level of the status, the tier of the status needed to take them out of the encounter. If there is one thing you take away from this video, let it be this. The way City of Mist structures adventures is brilliant. And if you don't already structure your adventures in this way that I'm about to describe, then I would encourage you to give it a shot, because I think this can be applied to any system. I know that because every system I run now, I am designing adventures with this structure. I'm going to hold it back here, so it's going to be a little blurry just to avoid spoilers for anybody that wants to run the starter box adventure. But all the adventures are designed as an iceberg. So you have depth 0, and then you go down further and further until your final encounter is down here somewhere. I love this way of structuring adventures, of location and incident-based items, that the players go here and this thing happens and this information is available here and it connects to these two things that are down below in the next depth of the iceberg. And then they can go over here still in depth 1 and find out information over here that leads to this other place. But it all converges and funnels to the final encounter of the adventure, or in what the system calls them, cases, because this is a very much investigative system. But I have run D&D 5e adventures. I've run Nimble 5e adventures using the iceberg structure, and it sings. Oh, and 13th Age adventures as well using iceberg. Eberron Renewed podcast link down below that I GM for using 13th Age set in the world of Eberron, if you like that. But yeah, to get a bit more granular in the description. So you start with depth 0, which is your inciting incident of the information getting provided to the players of like what's going on. There's a thing happening that needs to be addressed that we have to go after. And then you open up to the depth 1, which is the widest depth, having like 5 to 7 locations for a really big chunky adventure. And then you whittle that down to, 3 3 to 4 for depth 2, then maybe depth 3 has 2 or 3, and then depth 4 has one final showdown. But all these different locations connect to each other, and so it's some work to like think through the web of connections and like the breadcrumbs of how each place leads to the next place. But I promise you, once you like kind of get a sense for how to structure these adventures, my adventure planning has actually gone down in time since I have adopted this structure, because it's just easier for me to build a trail of clues the player characters need to follow, as opposed to trying to build a sandbox for them to play in. And as players are navigating the case, like I said, they come across dangers that are the adversarial forces that they come up against. Also, environmental hazards can be classified as dangers. And the danger cards are designed really simply and in a really cool way, where basically you just have the 2 different tracks, or sometimes there's 3, of what tier of status is needed to take them out of the encounter in some way, by either convincing them socially to step down, harming them, threatening them to run away, what have you. And then you have a couple of hard moves, which are the things that allow the MC to put statuses onto players. These typically come up either when players attack, but they don't protect themselves from counterattack, players fail a roll, or there is a soft move that allows you to use a hard move. Soft moves are the tells that you as the MC give the players. And this is another design thing that I absolutely love about this system, is the idea that you telegraph everything that you're doing as the MC. It's very, From Software, Dark Souls, where you do the big swing before you actually bring the hammer down, because then you can do a lot more damage if you've warned the players that, hey, if you get out of the way, nothing bad is going to happen. But if you decide to not get out of the way, something bad's going to happen. But let's say there's an innocent in the way of this hammer swing, and they go to try to get the person out of the way. And then with Powered by the Apocalypse rules, they roll a mixed success. And so then the decision is, do you throw the person out of the way and stay there and take the hammer blow? Or do you dive out of the way and leave that person to their fate? And I really love that about the idea of soft moves meeting hard moves. Soft moves are never going to put statuses on players, but hard moves can really pack a punch because you've given them a warning. The final big mechanic that it's worth talking about before deciding if you want to take this system on is how the game makes use of meta currency. Now, I know a lot of systems have meta currencies, and people have really strong opinions about any form of meta currency. But the way this system does it, I really like, and I think it simplifies gameplay a lot. In fact, I ran this starter box for both seasoned D&D players who have been playing for years and people who have literally never touched a set of dice before, that I had to read the what is a TTRPG section of the player's rules because they had no idea what a role-playing game was. And across the board, all of them agree that the way this system makes use of meta currencies makes a better experience. So stick with me for this. So we're looking at 2 different meta currencies, juice and clues. We're going to start with juice just because I think this will be the most familiar to a lot of you depending on what systems you've played. Juice is a currency that allows you to alter the environment or the state of play. When you take the change the game move, juice is what you generate that allows you to apply beneficial statuses to your fellow players, apply negative statuses to enemies that aren't like harm-based, or create story tags that alter the entire environment, or just anything that you can pitch to the MC and convince them is worth doing. The next meta currency is clues. All of my players love the clue system across the board. So when you take the investigate move, depending on the power of your roll, so if you're able to invoke 3 power tags, then you get 3 clues if you succeed on your investigate check. Clues allow you, the player, to ask 1 question per clue of the MC, and they must answer truthfully. Now, the MC can answer with a lead as opposed to an outright just statement of fact. If you all are doing an investigation for a murder mystery and the player using their clue just asks, who is the killer? Well, the MC can point out, oh, you notice this thing nearby. Maybe it's a book of matches with a bar name on it that leads you on the path to the killer. Or other times, it might be just a straightforward question of looking around, who was the victim? Like, who was the victim that we're seeing here? and you find their wallet in their pocket, it has their ID, and you get all the information. I love this so much more than just a flat perception check where the player is like, I rolled a 19. What do I see? And you as the DM just have to be like, you see this and this and this. In your head, you're thinking, what is a 19 worth? How much do they notice? Do they really spot this super secretive thing that will allow them to skip 3 parts of the adventure with a 19? I don't know. And with clues, it's on the players. Like, what are you looking for? And I had that multiple times while I was running this. If they would roll an investigate check and then they would just look at me, typically the more seasoned D&D players, because they were thinking of it as a perception check. It's like, what do I see? It's like, what question do you have? Like, what are you asking me about? And once we hit the flow with that, it was so nice to run both as the MC, and the players really liked having that level of control over what they were looking for. Now that I've had the chance to run the system a few times, what do I like about it in practice, and what do I think is a bit on the clunky side? Well, let's start with the bad news. First and foremost, if you have players who are tried and true experienced D20 players, then some of those players are really going to bounce off of this system more than likely. This is like taking a trained bass player for a symphony orchestra and handing them music for a 4-piece jazz band and saying, here you go. And they look at it and go, what do you mean? What am I supposed to do with this? Full disclosure, I have no idea if that analogy makes any sense, but I think the spirit of it conveys my point. All of my trained bass players, let me know in the comments how wrong I am, or if I nailed it. This system just takes a lot of the guardrails that exist with traditional D20 systems and throws them away. The clues system is a perfect example of, like, you don't get to just roll perception check and listen to an info dump from the DM. Like, it gives you a resource, and if you use that resource poorly, that's on you. That's something that you need to work on as a player, of like looking for the hints in the description of the environment to know what to use your clues to ask about. The other aspect of the game that caused some friction at the table, especially with the group that had a lot more experienced players, is some of the imbalances in the system. For example, some of the consequences of a complication on a roll are wildly imbalanced and pretty disparate, in my opinion. Either giving them a tier 1 or a tier 2 status versus burning one of their power tags seems pretty far apart in terms of severity, in my opinion, and in my experience with the game. Additionally, this is something that I heard from one of the players. I personally didn't clock it as being an issue, but it's worth saying because everybody approaches these games differently, and you might have a player, you might personally feel this way when you think about the system and look at it. The tags are not balanced at all. Like, from a first blush look, Lily Chow has a tag that says strength of 1,000 men, where, she has this like big green entity that Iron Hans that she can summon and punch people with the strength of 1,000 men. It's what it's called. She also has a tag that is punk clothing because she dresses like a punk. And those both get you a +1 to a roll. And for one of my players, that was just caused an untenable amount of cognitive dissonance of like, how are these things equal? I personally think that is the system working as intended, in that the impact that those tags have on the disparate situations you find yourself in are accurately reflected in the system. Another player played Lily Chow in a different game and did not run into that issue, but she is a much less experienced player in the D20 system. And so I think she was just able to take that at face value of like, oh yeah, if I'm in a laundromat trying to get some teenagers that are at the arcade machine to talk to me, the punk clothes are relevant. And if I'm trying to punch a bad guy, the strength of 1,000 men is relevant. Yeah, that's fine. And now for the things that I love. I want to preface this section with the caveat that I really love this system. Personally, I think it tells you at face value what it wants to be, and it sticks the landing. Every single player I put this system in front of who is not a longtime D20 player adored the system. People that had never played a TTRPG before that I put it in front of thought it was really quick and easy to pick up and learn to play. The majority of the people that I ran this for have some experience with D20 systems. Some of them a couple of years. They're in my home game that I've been running as a campaign for the past 3 years, but none of them would call themselves seasoned D&D players because they play once a month in a very rules light version of D&D that I run for all of my theater friends. And every single one of them gushed about how much more they loved this system because of the flexibility and the ability for them to do things that they just don't think would be allowed or possible in a more structured D20 system. And I think that's because this game comes with a lack of baggage and expectations for how you play. I think with a lot of more war simulation-y games like D&D or Pathfinder, there's an expectation to play optimally. These monsters are balanced in a way to where you need to play at a certain level of competency in order to survive the encounter. Whereas this just isn't that kind of game. And I think the players that I ran for really appreciated that. One of them said it was nice to just not cast Ray of Frost over and over again because I ran out of spell slots and this is just what I can do and is the most powerful thing in my arsenal. She got to look at the situation in front of her, look at her power tags, and craft something awesome each and every time that was different and had variety and spirit. Also, the game never really got bogged down. The pacing was really good, and the way that they structure the adventures and cases, and they encourage you to kind of structure your icebergs for your cases, always give you as the MC a certain level of ability to turn up or turn down the pacing through insertable encounters, where if they're moving from one location to the next and you feel like things are kind of slowing down a bit and players are maybe getting a little disengaged, you can insert a scene at that depth of the iceberg to really just jolt things back. And then also you can also be in kind of control as to how much information you're giving in your clues and how robust your descriptions are to kind of speed up or slow down the pacing. So the system never really got bogged down in my experience. And the last thing I want to talk about is just the art style of this system is incredible. I adore the comic booky style. I bought a bunch of the pre-gen character sheets just because I want the big poster of arts. And these are going to be like NPCs in the home game campaign that I run for my home game when the current campaign ends. And I just love the art style, and I want to be able to like hold up a poster-sized piece of art. Like, this is the NPC you're talking to, Scarlet. Can you guess? She's a mythos of Little Red Riding Hood. And no, I mean, it's just such a great evocative art style for the system and the style and the tone that they're going for. So I did want to call it the art style because it was the thing that initially drew me into the system. I saw some art for it and was like, that looks amazing. Let me look further into the system, and I'm so happy that I did. Have you all gotten a chance to play City of Mist before? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you would like me to do kind of I know how I would run for various D&D anthology books were really popular back in the day. If you'd like me to do one of those for the starter box, I would love to do that. I really would love to dive deep into this and kind of give my thoughts on how to properly pace and go through. So let me know if you'd be interested in that. And I think we're going to focus a bit more on TTRPG reviews on the channel moving forward, some non-D&D stuff for a variety of reasons. But please let me know in the comments down below what games you would like to see me review and dive into. I have a bunch on my shelf over here that I haven't gotten a chance to read yet, so I'm really excited to get into them. Thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you want to stick around for more. And I've been Eric, and I will see you next time.